I remember when I first told mom about my business idea, she wasn't exactly thrilled. In fact, she thought I was making a huge mistake. Ava, you're wasting your time, she'd say. You should be focusing on something more stable. This is just a pipe dream. I couldn't blame her for feeling that way. She'd always been practical, and the idea of starting something from scratch with no clear guarantee of success seemed crazy to her. But I couldn't let go of my vision. I believed in this business more than anything. Every fiber of my being told me that it was the right path, that this was my moment to build something meaningful, something that could change my life. I tried to explain to her, but it was like I was speaking a different language. She just didn't get it. All she saw was risk and uncertainty. She didn't see the countless hours I spent planning, learning, and strategizing. To her, it was all a gamble, and she couldn't understand why I would give up a stable job for something that felt so out of reach. She loved me, of course, but I could tell she was genuinely concerned. I could hear the disappointment in her voice. It wasn't the first time I'd felt misunderstood, but this time it stung more. There were moments when I wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe I was chasing something unattainable. But then I'd remember why I started in the first place, the dream of building something from the ground up, the idea of creating a business that wasn't just about money, but about purpose. I knew this wasn't just a hobby or a passing interest, this was my calling. The first few months were brutal. Every day felt like a struggle. I had to learn everything from scratch: marketing, sales, managing finances, negotiating with suppliers. I spent hours on the phone with people who didn't believe in me, trying to convince them that my business was worth their time. And then, when I finally did get a deal or a sale, it felt like a huge victory. But those small wins didn't feel like enough to silence the voice of doubt in my head, the voice that sounded eerily similar to my mom's. This is just a phase, I kept telling myself. It will work out. But there were days when I wasn't so sure. As the business grew, so did the pressure. I couldn't tell mom everything that was happening because I knew she'd just be more worried. I didn't want to admit that I was barely scraping by, that I was in debt, and that I was putting everything on the line for something that might never take off. But I kept going, pushing through the moments of fear, the exhaustion, and the overwhelming doubt. I kept telling myself that if I just pushed a little harder, things would turn around. I didn't have a clear roadmap, but I knew I had to trust the process. Then there were those nights when I'd be working late, staring at my computer screen, and I'd start to wonder if I was crazy. What if mom was right? What if this was all a mistake? The pressure was unbearable. But I knew I couldn't quit. Not now, not when I was so close to making this work. I had already sacrificed so much, and I wasn't going to throw it all away because of a few hard days. I tried to ignore the doubts and the fear. I kept telling myself that every setback was just part of the journey, that failure was just a stepping stone to success. But the truth was, I was exhausted. I had moments when I didn't know how I was going to keep going, but somehow I did. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. After months of grinding, of pushing myself further than I ever thought I could, I finally began to see the first signs of progress. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but I could see the pieces starting to fall into place. I had finally landed my first big deal, and that was the turning point. The deal wasn't massive, but it was enough to prove to me that I could do this. It felt like a small victory, but to me it was everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt like all the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights were starting to pay off. I had proved to myself that this was more than just a pipe dream, it was real. Even though the deal wasn't the end-all be-all, it was a significant step. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, mom was wrong. This wasn't a waste of time after all. And while I didn't exactly want to rub it in her face, I couldn't help but feel a little pride swelling inside me. But I didn't tell her right away. I wanted to keep going, build even more, and then show her what I had accomplished. I didn't want to tell her, I wanted to show her, I wanted to give her something that would make her see that I wasn't wasting my time. I wanted to prove to her that my dream wasn't just a pipe dream, it was something I could turn into a reality. But even then, there were moments of doubt. I had my fair share of setbacks, times when I thought I was close to losing everything, but I couldn't let myself fail. I had to keep pushing, I had to keep working, keep fighting. I knew that the moment I stopped trying, it would all be over. The business was my future, my passion, and I had to make it work. It was hard, and there were days when I felt completely defeated, but there was also this spark inside me that refused to die. It was this determination that kept me going, even when it seemed like I was failing. Every challenge only made me more resolute. It was clear that I couldn't stop now, and so I kept pushing forward one step at a time, knowing that I was getting closer to proving my mom and myself wrong. Then, after what felt like an eternity of struggle, something incredible happened. It wasn't the massive, life-changing event I had imagined, but it was enough to make me realize that all my hard work was finally starting to pay off. I landed my first big deal. It wasn't just a small client or a one-off project, it was a legitimate contract with a reputable company that believed in my vision. At that moment, it felt like the world was finally opening up to me. It was a validation that I didn't even know I needed, the countless sleepless nights, the endless hours of learning, the moments of self-doubt, it was all starting to make sense. I wasn't just struggling for nothing, I had created something that people were willing to invest in. But even then, I still couldn't fully believe it. For the longest time, I had lived with the idea that I was destined for failure. I had carried the weight of everyone's doubts on my shoulders, and even though things were starting to move in the right direction, I was scared. I was scared that it was all just a fluke, that one deal wasn't going to turn into anything meaningful. I was scared that the pressure would get too much, and I'd fall back into the trap of doubting myself. But that first deal changed everything. It gave me a sense of momentum, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was on the right path. It wasn't just a moment of success, it was a sign that this could actually work, that I could make this dream a reality. The deal itself was the product of countless hours of preparation. I had spent weeks crafting the perfect pitch, refining my business plan, and making sure every detail was in place. It was exhausting, but every time I felt like giving up, I thought about the bigger picture. I thought about how much I wanted to succeed, how much I wanted to prove everyone wrong, especially my mom. But when I finally signed the contract, it wasn't the paper itself that felt significant. It was the realization that I was no longer just dreaming, I was actually doing it. I was building something real. It was a slow burn, though. The deal didn't bring instant riches or fame, but it gave me something more important, confidence. For the first time in months, I looked at my business and saw potential. The wheels were turning and things were starting to click into place. Every new client, every new opportunity felt like another small victory. I began to understand the importance of consistency. How success wasn't just about hitting big milestones, but about the steady, relentless effort that goes into building something sustainable, and that's what I was doing. I was building. But even as the business began to pick up, I knew that it wasn't going to be smooth sailing from here on out. There were still obstacles to overcome. There were still days when I felt like I wasn't good enough, that maybe I didn't deserve this. But every time that voice crept in, I reminded myself of how far I had come. I reminded myself of that first deal, of how hard I had worked to get to this point, and I pushed forward. By now, I knew I had to stop waiting for permission. I had to stop waiting for everyone to tell me I was doing the right thing. It was clear to me that success wasn't going to come from others' approval. It was going to come from my own conviction, my own ability to keep going when everyone else told me to stop. That first deal was proof of that. It wasn't just a business win, it was a personal victory, one that gave me the courage to move forward. I started making bolder moves, I hired my first few employees, took on bigger projects, and invested in scaling my business. The risks were higher now, and the stakes felt more real. But with every new step, I felt more in control. I had a vision, and I was determined to see it through. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I was unsure, when I wondered if I was pushing too hard, too fast, but I had learned that hesitation was the enemy of progress. I couldn't afford to second-guess myself anymore. One of the most exciting things about this period was seeing my business evolve. What had started as a simple idea, a way to prove to myself that I was capable of something more, was now growing into a legitimate operation. I had clients who believed in me, a team that supported me, and a growing network of people who were starting to take notice. It was no longer just a dream, it was real, but even as my business expanded, there was still that nagging thought in the back of my mind. What would Mom think? Would she finally see that I wasn't wasting my time? Would she understand that all this effort, all these risks had been worth it? I wanted so badly to show her that I was capable, that I could take care of myself and her. I knew she would never truly understand the intricacies of the business world, but I hoped that by showing her how far I'd come, she would see that I wasn't just wasting my time. I was building something that mattered. I was doing something meaningful, but I didn't want to tell her yet. I wanted to show her. I wanted to take it a step further, to give her something tangible, something that would make her believe in me. That's when I started planning. I wanted to buy her a house. It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol. It was proof that all the sacrifices, all the struggles had been worth it. I wanted to give her something that would show her that my dream wasn't a waste of time. It was a path to something bigger. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but for both of us. At that point, I knew there was no going back. I had built a foundation, and now it was time to build something truly lasting. My business wasn't just about making money, it was about changing my life and the lives of those I loved. The journey wasn't over, but I was on the right path. And I had the confidence to know that I could make it to the finish line no matter how many obstacles came my way. The moment I bought Mom her house, it felt surreal. It wasn't just the house itself, though it was everything she had dreamed of. It was the culmination of all the hard work, all the doubts, all the nights I'd spent wondering if it would ever be worth it. It was the moment when everything came together and I could finally say, I made it. I remember the first time I took her to see the house, she had no idea. I'd been so careful, so meticulous in keeping it a secret. She'd kept asking me what I was up to, especially since my business was growing, but I always deflected her questions, never giving her a straight answer. I didn't want her to know until everything was perfect. I wanted it to be a surprise. When we pulled into the driveway, her face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. The house was beautiful, nothing too extravagant, but it had everything she ever wanted. A large garden, plenty of space for her to entertain, a cozy living room with large windows where the sunlight streamed through, and a kitchen where she could cook without feeling cramped. She stood in front of the door for what felt like an eternity, just staring at it, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe it was real. I don't understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is for me? I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. I could barely hold back the tears. I wanted to say so many things, how all of this was possible because I didn't give up, because I knew I could do something meaningful, because I wanted her to have a better life. But all I could do was smile because this moment was so much bigger than words could express. I showed her around the house, watching her eyes light up with each room we entered. It was like she couldn't believe it. She kept touching things as if making sure it was real. When we reached the backyard, she stopped, turning to face me with tears in her eyes. Ava, I never thought this day would come. You did this? I nodded again, finally finding my voice. Yeah, Mom, I did. All the hard work, all the late nights, all the risks. It led to this, and I couldn't have done it without you believing in me, even when you didn't fully understand. She looked at me, a mix of emotions crossing her face, pride, awe, and something I hadn't seen from her before, pure admiration. I didn't believe in you at first, she admitted softly. I thought you were making a mistake and I was scared for you, but now I see. You did it. I hugged her then, holding her tightly, letting all the emotions I had kept inside finally come to the surface. I'd wanted to prove something to her. Yes, I wanted to show her that I wasn't wasting my time. But more than that, I wanted to give her something, to show her that her sacrifices hadn't been for nothing, that the struggles she had gone through raising me on her own were worth it. I wanted her to feel secure, to know that no matter what happened, she was taken care of. And in that moment, as we stood in her new home, it wasn't just about the house. It was about everything I had achieved, everything I had built from nothing. It was about the long journey, the moments of doubt, the fears I had to overcome. It was about proving to myself and to her that I was capable of more than she ever imagined. We spent hours in the house that day. I could tell she was overwhelmed with emotion, and I felt like I was finally able to share my success with her in a way that went beyond words. She didn't have to worry anymore. The financial strain that had always been a part of her life was gone. This house was a symbol of freedom for her, a symbol that her daughter was now in control of her own destiny. As we sat together in the living room, I began to reflect on everything that had led to this moment. The late nights of working in my tiny office, the sacrifices I had made, the failures I had faced, all of it had brought me to this point. I thought back to the moments when Mom had told me I was wasting my time, and now here we were. I had proven her wrong, not through words or arguments, but through actions. I had shown her that my dream wasn't just a pipe dream, it was a real, tangible thing that had transformed our lives. Buying this house wasn't just about giving her a material possession, it was about showing her that I had built something meaningful, something that would last. It was about the pride I felt knowing that I had taken control of my life, that I had taken the risks necessary to make my dreams come true. And in doing so, I had created a life for both of us that was more stable, more secure, and filled with possibilities. That night, after we had spent hours going through every corner of the house, she sat me down and told me something I will never forget. She said, Ava, I was wrong. I didn't believe in you at first, but now I see what you were doing. I see your vision, and I'm so proud of you. Those words meant more to me than anything she could have said. It wasn't just the house, it was the understanding, the acknowledgement that I had turned my dreams into reality, not just for myself, but for the both of us. I had worked so hard to prove that I could make it, and now I had given her the kind of life she deserved. I realized that this moment, this house, wasn't just the end of my journey, it was the beginning of something even bigger.
It was proof that no matter what others thought, no matter the doubts, with enough determination, grit, and belief in myself, I could overcome anything. And as I stood there looking at Mom's tearful smile, I knew that this wasn't just my victory, it was ours. This house was more than just bricks and walls. It was a testament to the strength of dreams, the power of resilience, and the importance of never giving up. And most importantly, it was a reminder that no matter how many doubts others have or how many times they say you can't do it, you have the power to prove them wrong. The next few months were a whirlwind. After giving Mom the house, my life seemed to shift into high gear. The success I had tasted wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was the start of something bigger. My business was booming, and I was finally seeing the fruits of my labor. But there was still so much to do, so many things I had to learn and master. And the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. I'd always been the kind of person who, when I set my mind to something, would not stop until I achieved it. But I was also aware that success wasn't a straight line. There would always be obstacles, setbacks, and challenges along the way. The difference now was that I didn't fear those things anymore. I had learned to embrace them. Every challenge felt like an opportunity for growth, a chance to level up and prove to myself that I could handle whatever came my way. One of the most profound shifts I experienced was in how I viewed risk. Before, I had seen risk as something to be avoided, something that could derail everything I had worked for. But as my business grew and I saw the results of my hard work, I began to understand that risk was actually a necessary part of success. Without it, nothing significant ever happens. The most successful people I knew didn't avoid risk. They took it on with open arms, trusting that they would either succeed or learn something valuable from the experience. I had spent too long being afraid of making mistakes, afraid of what others would think if I failed. But the truth was, failure wasn't the end. It was part of the process. I started taking more calculated risks. I expanded my business, hired more people, and took on bigger clients. Each step was a leap of faith, but each one was also an opportunity for growth. I could feel myself becoming more confident, more certain in my decisions. It wasn't about knowing everything or having all the answers. It was about trusting myself and taking action, even when the path wasn't clear. I remember one particularly nerve-wracking decision I had to make. A major client came to me with an opportunity to expand our partnership significantly. It was a huge deal, one that could potentially propel my business to the next level, but there was a catch. If it didn't work out, it could set us back in ways I wasn't sure we could recover from. It was a terrifying decision to make, and I spent days agonizing over it, weighing the pros and cons, second-guessing myself. But then I thought back to the house I'd bought for Mom. I thought about everything I'd been through to get to this point, the countless sacrifices, the moments when I almost gave up, and how far I'd come. I realized that if I didn't take this risk, I would never know if I could succeed. If I didn't take this step, I would always wonder. So I decided to go for it. It was the right call. Taking that leap paid off in ways I could never have imagined. Not only did the deal lead to the biggest growth phase in my business, but it also taught me something valuable about myself. I was no longer afraid to fail. I had embraced the fact that mistakes were part of the journey and that failure wasn't something to be feared, it was something to be learned from. The confidence I gained from making that decision spilled over into other areas of my life. I was no longer afraid to step out of my comfort zone. I realized that comfort zones were where dreams went to die. Growth happened in the unknown, in the areas where I had to stretch myself, where I had to confront my fears head-on and take bold actions. The other thing that shifted was how I viewed my relationship with my mom. In the past, I had always felt like I had something to prove to her. I wanted to show her that I wasn't just wasting my time, that I was capable of achieving something real. But over time, as I grew in confidence and started seeing my business succeed, I realized that it wasn't about proving anything to her, it was about doing this for myself. Sure, I wanted to give her the house and show her that her faith in me wasn't misplaced, but in the end, it was my journey, my dream, and my victory. What mattered most was that I was finally seeing the power of belief, not just believing in my ability to succeed, but in believing that I was worthy of success. I had spent so much of my life doubting myself, comparing myself to others, and worrying that I wasn't enough. But now I knew better. I knew that the only person I had to prove anything to was myself, and once I understood that, everything else fell into place. I no longer needed the approval of others to validate my worth. I had become my own biggest supporter. I also started seeing the ripple effect my success was having on those around me. I had always wanted to give back, to make a difference, and now I was in a position to do so. I began mentoring other entrepreneurs, offering advice, sharing my journey, and helping them navigate the challenges I had once faced. It was incredibly fulfilling to see others succeed, knowing that I had played a part in their growth. I also started to give back to my community, using some of my profits to support causes that were important to me. I was no longer just focused on my own success, I was focused on how I could contribute to the success of others. The more I reflected on my journey, the more I realized that it wasn't just about money or status or accolades, it was about creating something meaningful, something that would last long after I was gone. My success wasn't just for me, it was for everyone who had supported me along the way. It was for the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. It was for my mom who had been my rock even when she didn't fully understand my dream. And it was for me, for the girl who once thought she wasn't good enough to succeed, who now stood on her own 2 feet, proud of what she had built. As I looked around at the life I had created, I realized that I had done something incredible. I had taken control of my destiny, overcome my fears, and created a future for myself that I could be proud of. I had proven that no matter how many times life knocked me down, I could get back up, stronger than before. The journey wasn't easy, and there were still many challenges ahead, but I knew now that I had the strength and resilience to face anything. My dream wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a reality, and nothing could take that away from me. This was just the beginning. The future was wide open, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. I had no idea what the next chapter of my life would look like, but one thing was for sure. I was going to keep pushing forward, keep growing, and keep proving that anything was possible if you never gave up.